Veritas Aquitus by Bones Boy 15, Chapter 5, History. A few weeks had passed since their first day, and like Naruto had promised Professor Husband, they hadn't been late since. Team Nox had just left the latest sparring class, where an unfortunate John had been embarrassed once again by the school bully, Carter Winchester. In an effort to cheer John up, Kurma asked to slip away and retrieve something from the room and promised to meet up with the group in the lunchroom. What he returned with certainly brought joy, but not to John. In fact, the present confused John more than it did lift its spirits. There was only one person who did not enjoy the gift, and that was Uchiha Sasuke. All of my hate. Sasuke glared daggers at his partners all throughout the lunch period. Why? The gift was a developed photo of the night he realized Haku was a boy, and to make matters worse, don't worry, Sasuke, I made a copy just for you, Kurama said as he offered the photo to his partner with a grin plastered on his face. You know, Whisker Boy, I bet a bunch of girls will pay well for a few of these. Yang looked up from her photo and grinned at her fellow blonde as he ate his 10th bowl of ramen. Her comment didn't make Naruto pause, but he did hurry and finish the bowl with a satisfied sigh. Naruto looked at Yang with an arched brow. How much lean do you think it's worth? Concerning the posture and amount of skin shown, Yang pursed her lips and closed her eyes before she grinned at the blonde seated across from her. 20 at least. You could see the lean sign appear in Naruto's eyes. Oh, wonderful. Now he has a great, rich, quick scheme, Sasuke said dryly. He glowered at Blake. Your blonde is a bad influence on ours, says the one that tried to grope his own teammate, Blake said just as dryly. She smirked when Sasuke groaned in his hand. So, can I get an estimate of all of our nudes? The blunt question from Naruto made Ruby, Haku, Pira, Blake, and Weiss turn the same shade as Ruby's hood. John was too out of it to really care. Ren and Nora were arguing about a dream Nora had, and both Sasuke and Kurama were far too used to Naruto's blunt personality to be thrown off guard by such a simple question. Yang tapped her chin. Well, for Haku, since he's such a popular trap, I'm guessing you could get 30 forms from some underwear guys and 40 for some girls. Expensive, aren't you? Kurama asked the feminine teen with a grin on his face. Haku sighed and turned to Ren. Are you sure you don't wish to switch teams? No, I need to keep an eye on Nora. Ren gave his friend a light smirk. He absently slapped Nora's hand before she could grab the bottle of syrup that was set beside him. Yang pointed at Kurama next. You'd probably bring in the least amount of currency. No offense. Maybe 10, 15 lien if you're lucky. Kurama shrugged and popped a fry in his mouth. You're all hideous apes to me. None taken. And me? Naruto asked with a small grin. Yang leaned forward and grinned back at her. I grinned at him. I don't know. I need some fine details before I can give a proper estimate. Naruto let his eyes become half-lidded as his grin became a bit more lewd. I'm sure I can get my roommates to sleep somewhere else for a night. Yang's grin matched Naruto's own as she made a similar eyes back at him. Why would they have to move? We have a spare bathroom. Okay, Yang, enough. Ruby put her proverbial foot down before she passed out from all the blood rushing to her head. She looked between the two blondes and huffed. If you two are going to flirt, that's fine, but come on, there are other people around us. So, Naruto and Yang asked with wide grins. The more the merrier. Ruby palmed her face and Weiss gave her partner a pat on the back. You walked right into that one, Ruby. I know, Ruby whimpered. Well, Yang and Naruto's jokes aside, we need to do something, Pyrrha said once she had let the blush on her face cool off. About what? John asked as he ate the chicken nugget. Pyrrha looked at him. You and your problem with Cardin? The teams looked over at the table where Cardin and his crew had gathered around a faunus girl that had long brown hair and rabbit ears coming out of her head. Kurama growled and crushed the fry that was in his hand into mush. His aura flared and the mush was eradicated on the spot. Haku placed a hand on his shoulder while he sent Team Cardinal a disapproving stare and then looked around in slight disgust. What? I don't have a problem with Cardin. John scoffed and played with his food. He's just, playing around. He's been a bully, Ruby corrected her fellow team leader. She clenched her fist as she listened to the boy in question release a loud laugh. Name one time he bullied me, John said with a weak grin. Blake lifted her hand up as she began to list such occasions. There was the time he knocked books, food, or your scrolls off your hand, the time he forced your sheath to expand into a shield and get you caught in a doorway, and let's not forget the rocket door the rocket locker, Sasuke added. So it was just a prank, like Naruto does. John was cut off as Naruto's smile fell. A heavy feeling of death overcame the table as Naruto glared at John, who trembled under his friend's gaze. My pranks are not intentionally cruel, nor do they aim to injure anyone. Naruto cut in firmly as he glared at his fellow blonde for daring to compare Cardin's bullying antics to his masterpiece of vengeance. Please, let go, Cardin. It hurts. The team turned to see Cardin tugging on the rabbit ears of the fondness, and Haku slapped his hand on the table. That does it. I can't just sit by and let this happen anymore. Haku scowled and made to rise, but was stopped by Naruto's hand. What are you doing? Stopping you from making a mistake. Naruto nodded towards the lunch monitor, who watched the interaction between Cardinal and Faunus, but made no move to break it up. Cardin's bullying, but not in the terms that obligate any severe punishment from authority, and with the bias towards Faunus, it's an even wider gap that he and others like him can slip through. If you go over there and start a fight, you'll be the one reprimanded. That doesn't make sense. It's keeping us from doing what's right, Ruby said with a frown. We all know that, Ruby, yet we all choose to do nothing as well for the same reason. Anyone could very well walk out and find a more tolerant teacher, but doing so would risk getting put up against the Winchester name, and that is a losing battle, Blake said. Nora slammed her hand into her palm as she gained an idea. We can break his legs. I wish, Kurama said with a scowl as he flicked his claws out and then forced them to recede in an effort to gain control of his anger. But like the others said, we just get in trouble for it. He looked at Weiss with a pointed frown. And you just don't care. Weiss frowned at him. I'm not fond of some fondness, true, but I do happen to think what Cardin is doing is unnecessary and cruel. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Shni. Kurama mused half-heartedly. He ignored the glare she sent his way. I can't stand scum like him, Pierre said with a scowl as her fist tightened, when Russell exclaimed his disbelief at the real ears on the girl's head. Those who abuse their power to wrong others. It's disgusting. Used to happen all the time back in Con, Sasuke said solemnly with a frown on his face. I was part of it. Hey, you learn to better yourself. Kurama reassured his partner with a hand on the shoulder. He turned and glared as Cardinal burst into more laughter when they knocked the Faunus' lunch out of her hands and kept her trapped between them. But something telling me that they never will. We can't just sit here and do nothing, Haku wished. Naruto grinned as he stood up, a gleam in his eyes. Who said we were going to? Boys, let's go stop a bully. The four boys left the table consisting of Team Ruby and Juniper, while the two teams watching them in interest, Naruto, Haku, Sasuke, and Kurama walked up to Team Cardinal and the rabbit-eared Faunus girl, careful to not attract attention to themselves as they did. Kurama and Sasuke seemed to know what Naruto had in mind, but Haku, with no clue what the plan was, decided to stand beside his team, beside intimidating as he was taught to. Hey guys, how's it going? Naruto asked with a cheerful smile and waved as he stopped next to Cardinal's leader. Cardinal looked up at the newcomer and glared at the fox Faunus that grinned maliciously at him. He smirked and looked back at his team while he pushed the Faunus girl into Sky, who kept her in place with a grip on her shoulders. Oh, look, boys, we have a few guys walking their pet. Russell, Duff, and Sky started to laugh along with their leader at their joke, but stopped and stared in shock as Naruto got in Cardin's face with a hostile look in his eyes. What? Wanna say that again? You wanna repeat that? You fucking prick? Huh? You wanna fucking start something? Naruto shoved Cardin back into the table and held his arms out while his team backed him up. Cardin's eyes were wide and bewildered, as were those of his teammates, possibly due to the fact no one had stood up to them like this before. Come on, 4-on-4, red versus blue, no camp kills, we'll fuck you up. Just calm down, Uzumaki. Duff tried to placate the irate student as eyes from all around the room started to lock onto them. Shut the fuck up, Duff! Naruto glared pointedly at the team before he returned his attention to Team Cardinal as a whole while he gestured to his team. We're all pumped. We're ready to fucking go. Let's do this! Kurama sneered eagerly as his tail switched from one side to the other. To Team Cardinal, it looked like something bright red flashed behind his wrapped around sunglasses. That's right, prison rules. Sasuke hasn't eaten in days. Naruto continued his crazy intimidation tactics that had drawn attention from all the students within the lunchroom. He was so into the act that he had realized all conversation had stopped, and that a few teachers were even starting to stare. That even staring in shock. That a few teachers were even staring in shock at the spectacle. I want the one in the middle, Sasuke intoned lowly as he stared at Sky intently. Me too, Naruto agreed as his smile widened. Team Cardinal looked over their fellow first-year team. The faunus grin the faunus's grin had widened and his sharp teeth were in plain view. Sasuke continued to stare at Sky and even let his tongue wet his lips like one would when they were hungry just as Sky's eyes met his gaze. Haku just stared intently at them with wide eyes that sucked you in and slowly drove you mad. And finally, Naruto had the crazy gleam still present in his eyes, and while his smile had the same appearance, thrown in the feral appearance his whiskers added, and the scary factor was through the roof. Nope, Russell yelled before he jumped out of the nearest window and ran away. The Finn Sky weren't that far behind him. Carden scrambled back, toppling over the table he'd been relaxing on in an effort to get away from the crazy students. As he ran away, Kurma purposely made the sound of a whimpering dog loud enough for the whole lunchroom of students present to hear, which resulted in a roar of laughter. It certainly added humiliation to the defeat. Yeah, that's right. You better fucking run away, you damn bastards. Huh. Huh. Naruto jeered over the laughter before he grinned and rubbed the underside of his nose with his thumb. See, that wasn't so hard, was it, Haku? It was rather satisfying to be a part of that solution instead of the problem, Haku said with a smile. He turned and smiled further when he noticed the monitor quickly walking away, as though afraid Team Nox would try to do something. Typical. Doesn't even bother to thank us for doing his job. Get used to it, Kurma scoffed as he followed Haku's gaze and shook his head before he approached the faunus that Carden and his cronies had been bothering. With a gentle smile on his face, Kurma offered his fellow faunus a hand to help her up. Are you all right? The girl averted her eyes as a small flush crossed her face as she took the offered grip and got back to her feet. Yes, thank you. It's no problem. Kurma smiled at her and she smiled back. So Kurma, who's your girlfriend? Sasuke asked with a smirk on his face. The girl flushed dark red and began to stutter incoherently while Kurma scowled in his partner's direction. Kurma lifted a photo up and arched the brow above the ridge of his glasses. Try me, Uchiha. I can make sure this thing gets spread all throughout Beacon before we go to history. Yeah, come on, man. How can you tease someone so cute? Naruto added with a grin as he hung off of Sasuke's shoulders. The faunus girl flushed a darker red at his question and began to fiddle with her fingers. Sasuke scowled for a moment before he sighed. I suppose you're right. She is rather cute, isn't she? Of course she is. Otherwise Kurma wouldn't be acting so nice right now. Hey, watch it, Uzumaki, before I show you how nice I can be, Kurma warned with a scowl as his two friends grinned at him. Haku shook his head as the three spiraled into an argument and smiled at the girl. Can you tell me your name, miss? Velvet Scarlatina, the girl, Velvet, said softly. What do you want to know? Haku gave his signature gentle smile as he offered his hand, so that I may know the name of my new friend. Our new friend, Naruto corrected with a grin on his face and his hands interlocked behind his head. Velvet seemed shocked by this while Naruto chuckled. After all, someone this cute needs to be shared. Well, that sounded creepy, Naruto, Kurma drawled with his arms crossed over his chest. Naruto hung his head. Realized it as soon as I said it. Well, Naruto's unintentional creepy comment aside, we do want to be your friend, Kurma said. He waved at her with his tail, and smiled lightly when she giggled. After all, we faunus got to stick together when we're surrounded by these hairless apes. Ah, but you love us, Kurma. Haku smiled at his friend. Kurma looked away slightly. Don't make it weird, Haku. Velvet just giggled a bit more as she spoke with Team Nox, happy that she'd made a few more friends. The more I see it, the less I believe it, Naruto said to Sasuke as they watched their history professor sit from one place to another with a small cup of coffee in hand. I'm starting to wonder what would happen if you pranked him through his coffee, Sasuke said. Professor Bartholomew Uplik was never seen without a cup of coffee, sort of caffeine drink in hand, and many wondered if it had replaced his blood. Naruto nodded. I considered it, but I think he's an addict. The withdrawal could be agonizing for him, like that one day we ran out of ramen in Kon. Sasuke shuddered. There was a reason neither Sasuke nor Kurma tried to curb or mess with Naruto's addiction. He could still hear the sirens to this day. Shush! Pyrrha chastised the two as they listened to their green-haired professor. Therefore, the Faunus Rights Revolution, or more popularly known as the Faunus War, was believed by many to be ignited by humanity's attempt to contain the Faunus on menagerie. And while this may seem like ancient history to many of you, it still has its marks on recent events. Professor Ublik rapidly explained. He sipped, not ran or walked because his legs never seemed to move, to stand in front of the class with his left hand folded behind his back. Repercussions can still be seen this day. He paused and zipped to the side of the room in order to sip from his small cup politely before he returned to the front of the room. Now, have any of you been subjugated to discrimination because of your fondest heritage? A few in the class has hesitated before Kurma, seated at the front next to the nearly trembling form of Velvet, raised his hand casually. Sasuke grimaced and Naruto gave him a small nudge. Kurama had already forgiven the Uchiha for his past actions, and it was time that Sasuke did so as well. Naruto looked back down as Velvet's hand and a few others around the room slowly or meekly followed their friend's example. Dreadful, simply dreadful. The manner that Ublik spoke sounded insensitive to those that weren't familiar with the man's eccentrics. It made Naruto smile lightly to see more and more people agree with the professor. He let out an annoyed grunt when Cardin, who was seated behind a sleeping John with his legs on the desk, snorted in amusement. There was a crackle beside him, and Naruto had to grab Sasuke's left arm in order to remind his friend that they were in class. Sasuke's hand let the static wear off, but the look in his eyes did not fade away. Remember, class, it is exactly this kind of ignorance that breeds violence, Ublik said before he once more took a sip from his cup. Ublik started to gesture with his pointer. I mean, just look at the White Fang, for instance. Can anyone tell me what they know about the organization's history? To the surprise of those outside of Kurama and Sasuke, Naruto lifted his hand up. Ah, yes, Mr. Uzumaki. Ublik nodded as the boy stood to speak. The White Fang was formed after the Faunist Rights Revolution to promote unity between Faunists and humanity. Despite most discrimination still holding firm in place, many of their peaceful public displays or marches were very effective. Naruto frowned as he continued. However, around the time that the Fourth War, an anti-Faunist terrorist organization, came to be, more and more humans pinned the blame on the attacks of the Fourth War on the Faunists. Consequently, riots and the rumors of the Shinee Company slavery incident weren't enough to turn the White Fang into a bastardization of what it once was. Blake, Weiss, Imperial were shocked at the passion that came from Naruto's mouth as he expressed disappointment with the turn of the White Fang. Professor Ublik, however, nodded his head. Precisely. Violence begets violence, an unfortunate truth for our world, and without true understanding, there can be no peace. As Ryokudo Sage, the infamous visionary during the war, said, "Thank you, Mr. Uzumaki. You may be seated." Naruto sat down and gave a cheesy grin as well as the victory sign to the surprised people that stared at him. Sasuke smirked and shook his head in amusement. Naruto may not understand technical use of theories or mathematics in the real world, but politics, tactics, and history was something he had a knack for. If he wasn't so determined to be a huntsman, Sasuke was sure that his team's leader could run for placement on one of the Four Kingdoms Council. Ah, hell, he was going to suggest that the blonde do so later in life anyway. But back to the matter at hand. Which of you young scholars can tell me what battle is believed by theorists to be the turning point of the Faunist Rights Revolution and when it occurred during the war? Ublik asked. He looked over in class and nodded. Mishni, the battle at Fort Castle, which took place in the third year, Weiss said with a confident smile. Very good, very good. Ublik nodded from where he stood behind his desk. Again, who can tell me the advantage the Faunists had over General Lagoon's forces? Sasuke looked to the left as Cardin snickered and prepared a paper football to flick at the back of John's head. His eyes narrowed and he waited for the right moment to send a small bolt of static at the paper in an effort to both crumple it and knock it off the path. Cardin frowned and let out an annoyed grunt, which drew Ublik's attention. Yes, Mr. Winchester. Cardin looked up and crossed his arms as a smile crossed his arms. I don't know about you, but I personally think it's because animals are easier to train than soldiers. Coming from the epitome of dumb apes, I'm not surprised you think that way. I wonder how long it took for your mommy to potty train you. Kurama quipped with a smirk on his face while the class let out snickers. Mr. Otsutsuki, please wait to be called on before you speak out of turn, or I'll be forced to offer you detention. Mr. Winchester, your answer is not only incorrect, but highly offensive and very ignorant. For this, I will ask for a 3-page essay on the contents of the Faunist Rights Act, with explicit details on each right granted to the Faunists in the Four Kingdoms, due on my desk next week, Professor Ublik said as he chastised both students fairly in terms of their offense. Cardin scowled heavily while Kurama gave a nod to the professor. Now, can anyone tell me the correct answer to the question? Professor Ublik asked before he took another sip of his coffee. He nodded as Pyrrha's hand rose. Yes, Miss Nikos. It's because most Faunists have exceptional night vision. General Lagoon tried to ambush the Faunists in the night and was consequently outmaneuvered and captured for his mistake, Pyrrha exclaimed. explained. She sent a look at Cardin for a moment before she looked back at the front. If he had actually taken time to think of a better strategy than the easiest one that came to mind, perhaps he could have emerged victorious. Or perhaps, if he paid attention in class like a certain few who shan't be named, he wouldn't have been turned into the butt of every Faunus joke. Blake said dryly. The student snickered once again as the obvious jab at a certain mace user. "You want to start something, Belladonna?" Carden asked as he started to rise. "Mr. Winchester, get back in your seat before I make that essay 10 pages long and due tomorrow. And Miss Belladonna, I will give you the same warning that I gave Mr. Otsutsuki. Wait to be called on before you speak, or I will give you a detention for disrupting my class," Ublik said with a frown. He sipped to the front of the class and slapped his pointer stick next to John, who snapped awake with a startled cry. "Mr. Ark, since you decided to finally rejoin us in the world of the living and conscious, I would like to know what you think about the Faunus War." It was a boon to the Faunus, and I'm glad it happened," John weakly answered. "Oh, and why is that?" Ublik asked with an arched brow. "Well, if the Faunus never stood up for their rights, then they wouldn't be trapped on menagerie, right? That, and I never would have met some of my friends. Heck, I probably wouldn't even have the thought of calling them my friends." John's answer drew smiles on his friend's face, while Professor Ublik withdrew his pointer stick and nodded. "A good answer, Mr. Ark, but I will still require you and Mr. Winchester to stay after class for a moment." The disheveled professor took a sip of his coffee and sipped to his desk just before the bell rang. "You're all dismissed, save for you two." John groaned and let his head fall to the desk while Carden scoffed and crossed his arms. "Then I thought about using some rope too. Wait up, Uzumaki." Naruto, Sasuke, Kurama, and Velvet were walking down the hall towards Haku's history classroom. The feminine boy had placed above average in the class and had been moved a grade forward, which was more or less a boon for his team. Haku's kind attitude made it all but impossible for the boy to say no to helping his friends study for one of either, in his words, easier tests. The three members of Nox and Velvet stopped and turned back around to see Weiss and Blake running after them. "Hey, Sneeze, Belle, just on our way to meet up with Haku. What's up?" Naruto grinned at the girls while Sasuke stared indifferently, and Kurama let out a small growl of annoyance. Weiss scowled at the blonde and crossed her arms over her chest. "For the last time, it's me, Uzumaki, and I told you, call me Naruto, Sneeze." Naruto returned with a grin, while Kurama smirked and Velvet let out a soft giggle. Weiss growled, but quickly shook her head. "Whatever, I'll deal with that later. What was all of that back in the classroom?" "That was history with Professor Oblik," Naruto said as he gained a worried look as he placed a hand on her head. "Are you all right? I mean, didn't you answer one of his questions?" "Very funny." Weiss drawled through gritted teeth while she batted his hand away. She glared at the snickering Kurama. "And what's so funny, Otsutsuki?" "Your face." Kurama chuckled as Weiss looked to be seconds from a meltdown. Velvet frowned to her new friends. "That wasn't very nice, Kurama," Velvet said softly. Kurama crossed his arms over his chest and turned his head to face the timid girl. "Vel, trust me, this is a Shni. She's used to this sort of thing. What we mean to ask is, how did you know so much about the White Fang, Naruto?" Blake quickly spoke up before her teammate tried to fight the Fox Faunus. "Again?" Naruto's smile fell into a frown. "It's hard not to know about the White Fang when you come from a village that used to welcome them." "Used to?" Blake and Weiss asked. Sasuke nodded. Naruto, Kurama, and I are from the city of Kon in Bakuo. It's a pretty popular town on the edge of the desert and the mountain regions. It's also where a majority of the old White Fang organization had started. So a lot of Faunus used to live there with humans. The Faunus were treated well until an attack that happened almost 18 years ago," Naruto said softly. He had his eyes down as he started to fiddle with the rings on his necklace. "After that, Mini and Khan blamed the Faunus for the attack, and a few were chased out of town. My family lived in a neutral ground, and my father ran a shop that provided a lot of dust to the area," Kurama added. He had his arms crossed and his hands clenched into fists. "We barely managed to survive thanks to the few humans that remembered their bonds with him." Sasuke put his hand on Kurama's shoulder and looked at the two stunned girls. "But that's in the past, and we've come to terms with it." Naruto let his necklace drop from his hands, and a smile spread across his face. "Yeah, gotta keep moving forward." Besides, Kurma said as he relaxed and a small smirk crossed his face, we all made a promise before we arrived at Beacon. Once we become huntsmen, we would find the fourth war and bring them down. Naruto nodded in agreement, while Sasuke gained a small smirk at Kurma's words. That's all we need to know, and Blake said before she grabbed Weiss's arm and dragged her along. Come on, let's go find Ruby and Yang before they do something stupid. Wait, will you unhand me, Blake? Weiss argued and struggled as she was pulled away. Naruto watched them disappear around a corner and scratched the back of his head. Think we laid it on a little thick? We were just being honest. Velvet, are you crying? Kurma asked as he looked at the rabbit-eared faunus. Her eyes were red and brimmed with tears while her bottom lips trembled. Suddenly, she pulled Kurma into a tight hug that caught the fox faunus off guard. Whoa, hey, Velvet, don't cry. Kurma paled as the girl sobbed into his shoulder. He turned to his friends. Guys, help. Sasuke crossed his arms and shook his head. Shame on you, Kurma, making such a cute girl cry. Naruto copied the raven-haired boy's actions. For shame. Screw you guys. Velvet, come on. It's okay. Kurma tried to console her weakly. He never had to do this before. Girls were not his forte, even if he did flirt around occasionally. Shame, Kurma Otsutsuki, for shame. Naruto and Sasuke repeated as they walked down the hall. Oi, don't leave me here, you bastards! What happened to your shirt? Haku asked as a slightly drenched Kurama and a red-eyed Velvet joined him. Sasuke and Naruto. With them were three others. With them were three other second-year students. Only one was a girl with a beret atop her shoulder-length brown hair and her eyes hidden by sunglasses, dressed in Beacon Standard Academy uniform like velvet. Slightly behind her were two boys, one with dark skin, white eyes, and messy copper hair, and the other was, to be blunt, a giant with short dark hair and a friendly face. Both boys wore the traditional uniform that Team Nox rebelled against, save for Haku. Velvet flushed to bright red, and Kurama glared at the amused Naruto and Sasuke. I hate you both so much, he growled as his tail flicked angrily. Well, well, well. Velvet, I never thought you'd be so interested in younger boys. The girl said with a smirk as she walked over towards the faunus. She gave Kurama a once-over before she pulled Velvet into a hug. I'm so proud of you. He's succulent. No, Coco, it's not like that. Velvet protested as her face darkened even further. I'm sure it's not. Coco nodded with a smirk on her face as she lowered her sunglasses and leered at the other members of Team Nox with a saucy grin on her face. I'm glad you were only with one of those gold medals, because if you were keeping all four to yourself, I would be so mad at you. Fox can only handle so much after all. The copper-haired teen let out a soft sigh while the giant chuckled. Coco looked over at Naruto and gave him a smile. Like I was saying, I'm Coco Adele. She pointed at the giant. That handsome beefcake is Yatsuhashi Daichi. Her finger landed on the copper-haired teen. That fine piece of ass is Fox Alistair, and you already know our lovely little rabbit, Velvet. She grinned and tightened her hug around the flushed faunus. Together we're Team Coffee, second-year badass hunters of Beacon. Nice to meet you, Coco. Naruto grinned as Kurama slipped over to Sasuke's other side, and Haku stepped beside the blonde leader. You already know my partner, Haku Yuki. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Velvet's boyfriend is Kurama Otsutsuki. Hey, and his partner is Uchiha Sasuke. We're Team Nox, an all-boy group filled with one of each kind, Coco said with a smile and a giddy sigh. She pointed at Sasuke, the sexy dark one. Her finger drifted to Kurama. Velvet's piece of man-meat is the handsome mystery and wild one. Coco ignored Velvet's squeak as she pointed at Haku. Our princely quiet one is my studious classmate. Coco's gaze landed on the younger leader, and she approached him with a smirk on her face. And finally, the ruggishly cute leader. Naruto's smile fell into a pout. Oi, I'm not cute. Coco laughed and pinched his cheek as she cooed at him. Yes, you are. Such a cute little huntsman in training. Kurama smirked. Ah, Karma, how I love you. Naruto batted away the older girl's hand and scowled as he rubbed his sore whiskered cheek. Coco pinched hard. Geez, if this is what Ruby feels like when Yang teases her, maybe I should cut her some slack. By I didn't think it was possible. Someone can curb him. Sasuke mumbled in shock. Haku shook his head. He known Coco, Fox, and Yatsuhashi only in passing during class, but when Coco had said something afterwards about a few boys that had stood up for their fondest teammate, he spoke to her afterwards and introduced himself, asking if their friend was Velvet. From there on, Coco had posed herself as a playful teen girl, but unlike Yang, but more mature and sure of herself. He figured that the introduction between Coco and Naruto would be healthy for his laid-back and childish partner. Haku wasn't expecting her at all, but Haku wasn't expecting her to all but adopt Naruto as her cute little brother. That didn't mean Haku wasn't welcoming it. He was chuckling alongside Sasuke and Kurama as their leader, who was brimming with confidence and always flirting with the opposite sex, suddenly became a slightly unnerved boy and struggled to get away from the older girl. Oh, but you're everything I ever wanted in a little brother, Coco pleaded as she rubbed her cheeks against Naruto's. Cute, sassy, and a troublemaker. She tightened her hug and looked at her teammates. Fox, Yatsuhashi, can we keep him? Oi, let me go! Fox shook his head with a smirk on his face, while Yatsuhashi chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Well, the gentle voice of the giant teen left his throat with a small rubble. As long as you promise to take care of him. Coco smiled happily and tightened her impressive grip on Naruto, causing his face to go blue. I promise. I take back any negative thoughts I had about today. Kurama chuckled out with a smile as he watched his friend try to escape Coco's grasp. This is the best day of my life thus far. Hands down. Agreed. Sasuke nodded. Haku smiled. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. God, let me go, you crazy lady. Guys, as your leader, I order you to help me. No, Naruto, stay with Sister Coco. Haku, help. Best day ever. Kurama reiterated. End of chapter 5.